Hello Nancy Drew fans! Welcome back to another book to game comparison video. Today I'm going to be looking at Last Train to Blue Moon Canyon. I will be comparing the novel, which was released in 1990 and is entitled Mystery Train and is part of the Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys Super Mystery series, and then looking at the computer game, which was released in 2005 and entitled Last Train to Blue Moon Canyon. As always, a spoiler alert is in effect because I do go through details, including who the culprits are, pretty early in my videos. This will be as I'm doing the synopsis. And I will be talking about fairly detailed elements from both stories as well, so if you don't want to know too much about either, it's probably best to avoid the video altogether, and then maybe read the book and play the game yourself first. So without further ado, let's jump in. So as always, I start by looking at the source material, which in this case is a Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys Super Mystery. It's number 8 of the series, and it is entitled Mystery Train. And this is the first time that Her Interactive used one of the Super Mysteries as a source for their games. And these are really great books. If you hadn't had a chance to read them, I do highly recommend them. They are a little bit more dark, I guess. They're a bit heavier than the standard hardcovers or paperbacks. But they are some really great mysteries, and you get both the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew working together in collaboration. It's pretty cool. So, what is this book about, you may be wondering? Probably are wondering, that's why we're doing this video. So, Nancy, Bess, Frank, and Joe are among a group of guests who have been invited to try to recover a diamond that was stolen 15 years earlier. And this diamond is called the Comstock Diamond, and it was found by a gentleman named Jake Comstock, who was a miner turned banker. And they are following a route he took when he was a miner, and they believe the thief, when he stole the diamond, followed the same route. So that's sort of the premise for the journey they're taking. And as the sleuths uncover clues about Jake's history, some of their friends vanish. Kate, who is an actor and singer on board, she's the first to disappear, followed by Joe. And additionally, the trip is riddled with sabotage, both on the train and off of it. So our characters in the book, there are many. I haven't quite listed them all, and I have listed a few who I'm not going to talk about in depth, but they do actually have some roles in the book. So we'll start with Jack Lerner and Laurie Adams. They are the hosts. We have Sarah Finney, who is a representative of Brixton's auction house, and that's who the diamond was stolen from. And they're sort of sponsoring the trip. They're at least involved with Jack and Laurie with having this trip take place. Then we have Maggie Horn, who is a well-known mystery author. Conrad Everett, who prefers to go by Connie, whose occupation isn't actually stated as far as I can recall in the book, but it seems as though he's a writer of some sort, either fiction or nonfiction. He's friends with a lot of researchers and authors, so I get the sense that he's involved in that field. Then we have John Grayson, who is an actor. Kate Harkins and Paul Fox, who are actor-singers who are hired to perform during the train ride, and Greg Ashby, who is a detective. And again, there are other people on board the train, more writers, a police psychologist, but they're just not as involved in the book, so I've chosen not to include them in this list. So then, of course, we go through our whole mystery, go through the book, all the chapters, a bunch of things happen, and in the end, what we learn is that Laurie is a descendant of Jake. She did not reveal this to her passengers. And she is seeking his diamond not just to reclaim it, but because she learns that it's going to be used to help find his mine, and no one knows where his mine is located. And she and her husband are responsible for the kidnappings of Kate and Joe. And her cousin's friend, this was a friend who her cousin, who is imprisoned, had made while in prison. He's aware of this journey, and he's behind the sabotage that takes place, because he wants a cut in finding the diamond, and it's quite convoluted, and I won't get into further details. I invite you to read the book instead. So that's the book, and now let's look at the game. So this is game number 13 of the PC game series, and it is called Last Train to Blue Moon Canyon. So in this game, we have Frank and Joe Hardy, who have been invited to take part in this train journey, and they're allowed to bring a guest, and so they invite Nancy. And the purpose of this train ride is to find out what happened to Jake Hurley. He had disappeared some years ago. His train was eventually found with its engineer on board dead, but no one knows where Jake was. So this group of young sleuths, along with other invitees, are traveling on Jake's original train, and on it are a bunch of clues for his mine. And the train makes a few stops in the game, not very many. stops in Copper Gorge, as that's where Jake's wife Camille was buried. And there are some clues there that the group doesn't necessarily realize. So the characters in the game include Laurie Gerard, who is the host of this trip, Tino Balducci, who is a police detective who has recently come to fame for having captured these bank robbers, John Gray, who is a ghost hunter and has his own television show, and Charlene Purcell, who is a familiar name. She is an author, and Laurie is a big fan of hers. So in the game, Nancy, with the help of the Hardys, seeks out these clues on the train and eventually finds out where the mine is. And Laurie seeks this knowledge of what happened to Jake Hurley, not because she just wants to, know what happened to this guy, why did he disappear, but because she's aware of this historical and valuable letter that he kept on his person, and she wants it. And when Nancy finds Jake, she gives this letter to Laurie, and Laurie decides she's going to trap Nancy. And this is done in order to avoid sharing the limelight, but also to increase her status and to gain this positive fame that she tried to save Nancy and failed, and she's almost heroic. And that is really what Laurie's all about. She's really infamous and is trying to change that and goes about it the wrong way. Although it is great that she's trying to unearth this piece of history. So that is the computer game. I mean, there's much more to it. Just like with the book, I'm not going into all of the details. There's a lot more to the story, and I again invite you to play the game if you haven't already. So now it's time to compare the two mediums. So the first thing I'm going to do, of course, is look at the title. Whenever the titles change, I look at those first. So our book is called Mystery Train, which might seem like kind of a lame title, but in the book, that's actually what they call the ride that they're on, is the Mystery Train. That's its proper name. And then in the game, the title is a little bit more elaborate. It is called Last Train to Blue Moon Canyon, and it's a bit more revealing about the journey that we are on in the game. And I think it's a nice change. I think it's not as bland as Mystery Train. I think that was a good change that Her Interactive made. So following this, I look at the storyline. So they are quite similar between the book and game. More specifically for the book, we have a group who's invited to investigate a theft of a diamond, and they are traveling by rail along the same route as the original diamond's finder, and possibly that of its thief. In the game, however, the group is invited to help solve the disappearance of Jake Hurley, and they're traveling on his old train. I should go back to the book. The train that they're traveling on didn't belong to Jake. It's just a train. It's a regular train that they've hired for this journey. In the game, the train belonged to Jake. They also seek out the location of his mine while they are searching for him and what happened to him. So as for the location, it's pretty similar in some respects. They both start off in Chicago. In the book, they're traveling from Chicago, Union Station, to San Francisco, and they actually end in San Francisco, and they have a couple stops along the way. In the game, they also start in Chicago, and then go to Copper Gorge, and then eventually to a mine in Nevada. So there's no stop in California. So with that, I will look at the characters. So I'm going to start with the two Lauries. So in the book, we have Laurie and her husband, who are the hosts of the train trip. And she wants to find out where the diamond thief hid the Comstock diamond 15 years ago. That's her claim, at least. She's secretly a relative of Jake, and she knows that she requires that diamond to find his mine. And she, again, along with her husband, are responsible for kidnapping Kate and Joe. In the game, Laurie is still the host, and she invites detectives as well as an author to help find out what happened to Jake Hurley, and then to possibly and hopefully locate his hidden mine. But she's also deceptive, just like Laurie from the book. In reality, she wants to find this letter that she knew Jake had, because she knows of its value. So their roles are in many ways the same. They're both hosts and they're both liars. They're not revealing the true reasons for embarking on this adventure. But there's a little difference in with regard to what their actual motivation is, their ultimate goal. Now, with this, I'm going to look at Kate from the book because Kate is also what influences Laurie in the game. Laurie from the game is derived from both Laurie and Kate from the book. So Kate is an actress and singer, and she's hired by Jack and Laurie just to perform during the train trip, just for entertainment. And she winds up overhearing this private conversation between the husband and wife which is fairly revealing to their true motivation. And so they hide her on the train. And so that element of her being hidden or kidnapped is obviously part of Laurie from the game, because Laurie winds up, in air quotes, kidnapped in the game. So there is one of our main characters. Next, I'm going to look at Connie and Tino. And so in the book, we have Connie. Again, this is Conrad Everett. He likes to go by the name Connie, and he's very charismatic. And he thinks he's figured out who the diamond thief was all those years ago. But then his idea is shot down by Greg Ashby, who again is a detective on board the train. And he enjoys working with Nancy, Bess, and the Hardys. Like he's very personable. Tino, on the other hand, is not always that personal. I mean, he's got this fame, and he really wants to maintain it, and he actually tries to keep his so-called discoveries to himself. He doesn't want to share the limelight. But as he discovers his mistakes, he wants the teens to share their information with him. He doesn't want to be in the dark, and he wants to be able to claim fame again. He's also responsible for pulling the train's emergency brake, and he frames John Gray. Connie in the book doesn't do that. He doesn't try to frame anyone. He does think he's made discoveries, and he makes these statements, and he does wind up being wrong, but he's not as selfish as Tino. And next I'm going to look at Greg, because I think Greg also influences Tino. So in the book, Greg is a detective. So just like Tino, who is a police detective, we've got that role that's taken. And Greg in the book is the one who counters Connie's idea. And Connie said it was the mastermind who probably stole the diamond. And Greg, he was working that case, and he knew the mastermind. He actually knows where the mastermind was at the time of the theft. So he's the one who kind of shoots down that idea that Connie shares. In addition to this, Greg also initially suspects Joe of being responsible for Kate's kidnapping. And we could kind of say Tino takes that a little bit in claiming that John is responsible for pulling the emergency brake. Although we know Tino is actually the one who did that. Greg did not kidnap Kate. He's just doing his job. He's actually a good guy. And then our last two characters, we're going to look at John. John in the book has a very minimal role. I've only mentioned him because of his name and the fact that he was an actor. So he played Sherlock Holmes on TV in the book. And that's pretty much all you need to know. In the game, he's a ghost hunter with a television show. So there's our tie. His first name, John, involved in TV, and even their last names are similar. In the book, his last name is Grayson. In the game, it's Gray. So that's really it as far as the similarities and where they took John from a book character. In addition to what I've already noted, he also believes that Camille, who is Jake's wife, her ghost is present on the train. And he says that either Laurie or Nancy is in danger. He's also very personable. So much like Connie, he is a very charismatic person. He enjoys speaking with Nancy. He doesn't put up this front. And so we could say that part of his personality is taken also from Connie in the book. So we have a couple characters that are sort of intertwined as far as where they've been pulled from. And then our last set of characters are Maggie or Charlene. So in the book, Maggie is this really well-known mystery writer, and she tends to look down on the others on the train. And she has very few interactions with the main sleuths. Like her role also, much like John in the book, is minimal. She's just sort of present and makes the odd comment here or there. Charlene, on the other hand, is a little bit more present. However, she's not involved. She still keeps to herself. And this is because she's busy writing another book. And really, she has a little interest in the case at hand. She doesn't think it's going to come to much. Like she's present just in case a great story comes from it, but her expectations are low. And she's also a character from The Secret of Shadow Ranch, so that makes her different because she's been, in a way, repurposed. She's come back, so she's bound to be different from Maggie. The main similarity is that they're both authors, well-known authors at that. So those are the characters, and that's where those comparisons are going to end. But now we're going to look at elements from the game and book. So we'll start by more of our purpose of the stories, the train and the route. Makes sense to start with that for events and elements. So obviously both stories take place aboard a train. In the book, the group is following a route taken by Jake, and again possibly by the thief. And there are multiple stops along the way, including in Central City and Emerald, and eventually ending in San Francisco. In the game, we don't have as many stops. The crew is traveling on Jake's train. I should mention that, as I actually did earlier. And there's only one planned stop, and that's in Copper Gorge. And they stop there because that's where Jake's wife is buried. And then Nancy unearths the location of Jake's mine, and that winds up being the second stop that the train makes. So some differences there, but still we're taking part on a train ride. The next thing is accidents. So in the book there are quite a few. So we have a chain that breaks on this observation platform, and Kate almost falls off. So her life's in danger pretty early on. The kitchen catches fire on the train. We are no strangers to kitchens catching fire, although this game does not include it. We have a few other games that do, but surprisingly not this one. Even though the story, the actual book, has this event, which is just kind of funny when you think about it. We also have brakes that are sabotaged. There's also a miniature train ride that Nancy and Bess ride when they're in Central City, and it's sabotaged. And then this map that Nancy has stolen from Lori, or not, she hasn't stolen it, pardon me, she's borrowed from Lori. It is supposedly stolen from her. In fact, Lori takes it back. She doesn't want Nancy to get too good a look at it. In the game, pretty much our only act of sabotage is the emergency brake being pulled, and John is framed by Tino. And I mean, we do have a similarity here in that brakes are involved in both stories. The brakes are sabotaged in the book, whereas the emergency brake is pulled in the game. So there's a similarity there. But otherwise, minimal accidents in the game, quite a few in the book. And then we'll look at a kidnapping, which takes place in both. So Kate, followed by Joe, are kidnapped by Lori and Jack in the book. In the game, Lori fakes her own kidnapping, and then her finder winds up earning this advantage in the search for Jake's mine, and that advantage is a letter that he had written to his niece Ruth, and it includes clues to his mine. So there's our kidnapping element. That's similar between the two stories. Next is gemstones, and I really, really thought this was great. So again, our book, the purpose is this train ride to find a stolen diamond, the Comstock diamond. That's not the purpose of the journey in the game. However, Jake left various gemstones on his train, as well as in Camille's tomb. And these are used to power his projector and then helps to lead to his hidden mine. So Her Interactive took this main part of the original story, didn't quite keep it as a main objective. I mean, it's very important that Nancy find the gemstones, but they've incorporated it in a different way into 6, I believe, gemstones instead of 1 diamond to help lead to the mine. So I thought that was great, especially when you consider the fact that the point of Lori trying to find the diamond is to find the mine. With the gemstone, Nancy finds the mine. So it's still there, it's still present, this incorporation of gemstones. It's just twisted a little bit, and I think it's done really, really well. It's fantastic. I love what Her Interactive was able to come up with when they tweak things, but still managed to incorporate them in a different way. And then, of course, we have the mine. So the whereabouts of Jake's mine are unknown in both stories, although in the game it is located. And then the final thing to talk about, the ending. These are fairly different. So in the book we have Lori, who has a cousin named Stan. They are both inheritors? Can't think of the right word. They both inherit from Jake Comstock. And he, with her help, had originally stolen the diamond 15 years ago. She'd placed this bid on it, which she knew she wasn't going to win. But she was able to help Stan steal the diamond. And he meant to use it with Lori to help find the mine, but he wound up having to hide it. He decided to try and figure out some of the history of Jake as well, knowing he would need that information in combination with the diamond, but he wound up being arrested. Lori thought that he had double-crossed them. There's this whole miscommunication in battle, and cousins not treating each other well. The point is that he was retracing the route that Jake took, and so she did too, thinking that that might lead her to the diamond that her cousin stole for her and then hidden. And she's on a bit of a clock because Stan is due to be released from prison at around the same time. And it turns out that he hid the diamond in San Francisco, in this place where he and Lori used to play as children. So everyone winds up getting to the spot. Lori and Jack are tracked down by the sleuths. Stan shows up with his jail buddy. A fight ensues. And in the end, the diamond winds up being sent over a bluff, only to be lost in the bay below. And no one's ever going to be able to find the mine because the diamond is now deep in the water. So we don't have a scene remotely like that in the game. Instead, we have Laurie, who really wants to solve the mystery of Jake's disappearance in order to claim, again, this letter she knew that he carried, which was written by the president, Abe Lincoln. And when Nancy finds his mind, she, unbeknownst to her, and Laurie both leave the train. Nancy finds Jake's remains, as well as the letter. Laurie then reveals herself and asks if she can take the letter, and then she decides to try and trap Nancy in the cave. As already noted, she wants fame on her own, and she wants to look like a hero. She decides that Nancy should fail. Nancy did something stupid. Laurie managed to survive. She's going to be good famous rather than having to deal with further infamy. And of course, she doesn't succeed. Nancy finds a way to escape, and the Hardys also notice that the girls are missing. They disembark from the train, find the girls just after Nancy's escaped and after she's stopped Laurie. So very different endings. Very different indeed. And that's partly because the storylines have been tweaked in such a way that the endings can't quite be the same. So then to conclude, the 1990 Super Mystery is a really great story of adventure, retracing history in search of a long-lost diamond. I really enjoyed reading this book. And then the 2005 PC game refreshes this tale by adding clues to the train in which the sleuths make their journey, and it teaches the value of friendship. And that comes up a fair bit. We learn that Jake had this uncanny knack of becoming friends with lots of people, including famous people. So we have Abe Lincoln, of course, and Samuel Clemens, or Mark Twain as he was better known. And I think that's a really important message. A lot of people struggle with that, or they don't understand that it's a powerful thing to have a friend and to be able to make friends. I think Her Interactive maintained much of the original storyline and characters with a few adaptations. A good example of this is in the book. There's a fight on the top of the train that doesn't happen in the game. And in the game, we have the storyline involving Camille, Jake's wife. That is created by Her Interactive. Jake didn't have a wife noted in the book, so some things removed, some things added, and done in a really lovely way. And in my opinion, both the novel and game tell a wonderful story, and they're both well worth the read and the playthrough. And there we go, folks. That is my comparison for Mystery Train and Last Train to Blue Moon Canyon. As I noted when I did my playthrough for the game, I do think this is a really underrated game, and I don't know why that is, why other games stand out more than this one. And I just think it's such a wonderful story, and same goes with the novel. It's a great adventure. I really like the setting of being on this train. It's a really neat way to take a journey. And I like, as far as the book goes, all the stops that the teens and their companions make to try and track down more of the history of Jake Comstock. And as far as the game goes, I really like how all these clues were incorporated into the train, how Jake hid all this information aboard this vessel, if you will, as well as at Camille's tomb. We've got a gem there, as well as clues to some numbers to open up and reset some of the pipes. So it's just really quite a fantastic story. Very romantic and just a lot of fun. I don't think there's any negative to either. I mean, I'd mentioned during the playthrough I didn't like the inclusion of Charlene because she came from The Secret of Shadow Ranch, but after reading the book, it makes sense to some degree because there was a mystery author aboard the train in the book, although her role was rather minimal, but it adds an extra element to the game. I don't think there's much more to say. It's just such a great set of stories. Both mediums are wonderful, and I do highly recommend, if you can, to read the book and of course to play this game. Thank you very much, everyone, for watching this comparison video. Again, I had a lot of fun and I enjoy both stories, and I hope you do as well. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye now.